I'm Stan Bertolut, and welcome to this live session. I'm delighted to welcome Dominic Carosser, the CEO of Concilio Consulting America. Concilio is an independent global consulting firm that helps manufacturers and industrial companies strengthen their operations using SAP technology. Welcome to this session, Dominic. And maybe as an introduction, can you tell us how long has Concilio been active in the United States? And who are some of your key customers in the US? Which industry do you focus on?
Sure. Thank you, Stan. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for the introduction, Stan. So, Consilio is active in the US since 2 years now. So, we founded our office back in 2024 in Chicago, Illinois. And at the end of 2024, we also opened an office in Charlotte, North Carolina. We are focusing more or less on all industries that are somehow dealing with manufacturing processes. Automotive industry, machining industry, aerospace, defense, but also process industry is one of our key industries that we're working on. And yeah, Consilio was founded 30 years ago from Jürgen Löhle, and he was part of the SAP consulting before in the area of supply chain management. And actually, this is still our footprint. So, our highest expertise is in the area of supply chain management. So, talking about SAP terminology, that's production planning, PP, PPDS, so production planning, detailed scheduling, logistics, EWM, procurement. But over the years, we also extended our knowledge and we did not only grow in terms of numbers, we also grow in terms of adding new value streams to our portfolio. So in the meanwhile, we cover all value streams, lines of businesses that SAP is providing, including finance controlling, customer service, sales, and all those well-known modules.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. So we are entering the last runway to get off ECC before 2027. But when we speak to anyone involved in an SAP project, we soon realize that there is a lot of confusion about this deadline. So, Dominic, what is the real state of the 2027 timeline?
So the official statement from SAP is the mainstream maintenance is ending on December 31st, 2027.
Mhm.
However, there is not only a mainstream maintenance. The official statement is not telling the whole story. And what is very interesting, this is not only affecting SAP ERP customers, this is also affecting S/4HANA customers, which are on old releases. But I have prepared a slide which explains this in more detail
All
and
right.
should bring some light into the dark. Exactly. Perfect. Thank you. This is the slide that I meant. So what you can see here is, first of all, of course, the timeline starting back in 2022 and going to 2033, actually. So not only 2027, we're talking about dates in the future as well. So what we can see in the first two lines is we have the SAP ERP customers, which are still on an SAP ECC with an enhancement package level lower than 6. For those, actually the mainstream maintenance ends this year already. So not 2027, it really ends this year. And there is no chance for any kind of an enhanced maintenance. So if there are customers, so we know that there are customers, it's not that many, but there are still customers which are on these old versions of SAP ERP. They nearly need urgently to react on that. The second line shows the situation for SAP ERP customers with an enhancement package of 6 and higher. These are actually the majority of the customers that we have that are still on SAP ERP. For those, the mainstream maintenance ends on December 31st, 2027. So this is the group of customers where SAP's statement is referring to. However, you also can extend this maintenance. So you can have an extended maintenance, which goes until the end of 2030. And even after that, you can have a customer specific maintenance, which goes to the end of 2033 and maybe even further. But there is a major thing that you need to know. The extended maintenance, and especially the customer specific maintenance, costs a lot of money because you have your standard license fee that you pay for your SAP products that you're using in ERP. And if you want to use it after 2027, you have to pay more for the licenses. So in general, we say, but of course, that's always negotiation with SAP. We know that in general, we say extended maintenance is at least 2% more, and customer specific maintenance is at least 4% more of your annual fee for your SAP ERP product licenses. And as I said, this is just the picture for our SAP ERP customers. But you can see we're now in 2025, and SAP S/4HANA's first version was back in 2015. So this slide starts with showing SAP S/4HANA since 2019. But you can already see if you are on a version 2020 or 2019, your maintenance also ends already this year, and you need to go into a customer specific maintenance or start upgrading your system. And if we go further, 2021, this ends then 2026, and so on. Starting with the SAP S/4HANA version 2023, this changes again because the mainstream maintenance there is not only 5 years, it's 7 years. Yeah. So when you have a 2023 version, your mainstream maintenance is at least going until 2030. So this is the whole picture. And I know it is still maybe very complex, but I hope that this PowerPoint slide brings some light into the dark in general about the maintenance. For further details, we will share this slide after our session, and then all of you can have a closer look.
Yeah, I will display the link and people can scan this QR code or go to this link and you will have access to that. Dominic, you told me that even you at Concilio found this deadline quite confusing. And this is why you did some research and come up with a timeline. Why do you think it's so confusing for most people?
I think the first point is it's confusing because it changed a lot in the last couple of years. With the first S/4HANA version, SAP simply said, okay, this is our deadline, and that's it. But then over the years, they started switching the deadline back and forth, extended the deadline, then they added the extended maintenance, then they added the customer specific maintenance. And nearly every 6 months, something changed in what SAP was promoting in regards of mainstream maintenance or end of life cycle or however you want to call it. And that what brought the confusion in it. And we are in close contact with SAP. We talk at least on a monthly basis with SAP and ask about what is your strategy about the releases? Did anything change in there? And so we gain a lot of knowledge about that. And if we then go to customers, we prepare those slides, which we are showing right here. And then we can talk to the customers and say, this is your actual situation. So you are on that version. This is what the situation is. And then together with our customers, we develop a roadmap of how they can proceed in their SAP journey.
All right. So I'm sure it's going to be extremely useful for everybody to have access to this clear timing. And yet we see that many S/4HANA programs struggle, right? They struggle despite strong planning. How do you explain that?
Well, there are multiple reasons for that. And of course, it depends on the project, it depends on the customer. But what we very often see is those companies that are switching from ERP S/4HANA, they have developed custom code over the last 20 or even more years. And it's not only that those companies created enhancement in existing programs, they created their own applications. Yeah. So people that are working for these companies, they know these applications and these enhancements since many years. And when you start telling them, hey, you will not have your custom code enhancements anymore, you will not have your set applications, as we call them, anymore. They say, hey, we're working with this since 20 years. We need that. Huh? And what I have seen is when you don't have a change management right at the beginning of those projects, which are together with the users and together with the consultants going through those changes from
Mhm.
custom code to maybe a new custom code even, or ideally, of course, a standard application, the programs are struggling because the users don't accept the new applications, they don't accept the new processes. And if you involve the change management right at the beginning, they can explain, or hey, these are the benefits from getting rid of the chain, getting rid of the custom code, switching to new application. And that's actually, even if you do like a brownfield conversion, you will have custom code which changes because some things simply don't exist anymore that those custom applications are based on. So, for example, a big customer from us, Knorr-Bremse, they have a huge implementation with custom code based on the MRP lists. So those MRP lists, will not exist in S4HANA anymore. So
Mhm.
they are compatibility lists. So they will be deleted or wiped out. So what we did with this customer before starting the actual S4HANA journey was we had a pre-project called S4HANA Trail, yeah, and we brought them on the trail to S4HANA and explained them, okay, these are the new applications that you can use instead of your custom code. And this was very beneficial. And as I said, change management was involved there right at the beginning. So we had the business on our side and the IT on our side.
Mhm.
Next to the change management, one very important thing is master data. You have to start with cleaning up your master data, with optimizing your master data from the very beginning of such projects. We had projects where we even started with pre-projects for master data before the actual project. So we call them boot camps, where we dig into the actual situation of their master data with the customers and say, hey, you need to optimize this because S4HANA, it has a new database, has in certain areas new requirements on master data. Let's work on that already now, because then our transition with the master data from your legacy system or your SAP ERP system to S4HANA will be much, much easier. Next to that, of course, you need to give enough time. Usually, all projects right now are run via the SAP Activate methodology. In that methodology, we have multiple phases. And one of the most important phases is the explore phase. In the explore phase, we analyze the actual processes and match it to the new processes. And we had recently a project in the United States in the Delaware, Maryland area where a customer was rolling out S4HANA template. And the template was actually based on their first rollouts with very small plants and a very limited number of processes. And with the release that we have done recently, where we went live back on November the 1st, we had 8 plants in 3 different countries on 2 different continents, including the US Eastern cluster. And the explore phase was very limited because they really wanted to have those plants on S4HANA in 11 months. So the explore phase was only a couple of weeks. And we said right from the beginning, hey, it will be really hard to rush through this explore phase in this limited time frame because the users they will just sit there and say, okay, okay, this will be the new stuff, but you cannot really discuss in depth their needs and their processes. And actually, yeah, during the UAT and also the integration tests, we found out, yeah, okay, processes that have been designed during the rush, they are not really fitting. So that brought us into a situation where we had to spend a lot of money and bring in a lot of more consultants and developers during the real life phase to work on those processes. And last but not least, I would say one very important thing is give key users or super users, however you want to call them, give them enough availability to spend on the project. We need in those projects the input from those major resources. And I know these are always the people that are important for running the business as well. But without having their input, the project will definitely struggle.
And you think that's not happening today? Those users don't give their input enough.
Yeah, well, I don't say that all projects run like this, but
Mhm.
from my experience, let's say every second project, we struggle with the availability of the key users. So at the
Mhm.
beginning, it is said, yeah, they have at least 50% time for the S4HANA project. And then you send them meeting invites or you say, hey, I come on site for, let's say, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then they're sitting in those workshops and they have their telephone next to them, and the telephone is ringing every 10 minutes because production is calling, hey, we have an issue there. Can you check that, please? And of course, you have to run your business somehow. But this is before you start your project, make sure you have enough and the right personnel for the project and to run your business.
That's interesting because, yeah, you just mentioned a rollout that went well in the US. SAP is a German company. Concilio started in Germany before moving to the United States. And I'm already wondering, Dominique, what are European manufacturers doing differently that the US firm should learn from, if anything?
Yeah, if anything. First of all, I think Europe is not Europe. Projects in Germany are done differently to projects in the southern part of Europe, like Italy or Spain, and also in comparison to the northern part, like Sweden or Norway, or especially the United Kingdom. And I think in the US, it's the same. The US East Coast is not the same as the US West Coast, and Florida, anyhow, is different. When thinking about Europe, let me talk maybe about Germany itself, because as you said, SAP is a German company, and I was born in Germany, and Consilio was founded in Germany. So I think Germans, and they bring this also into the project, they are very straightforward, very structured, and they bring in less emotions into the projects. What I've learned since I'm in the United States is US, the US itself and the people living there have much more emotions. But when talking about S4HANA projects, and I like that. Yeah, I like that. I like the emotions. I don't like this straightforward. Sometimes the Germans are called boring, and that might be right. Yeah. So I like that. But when it comes to S4HANA projects, I think it makes sense to take a little bit out of those German style and be a bit boring, to really structure your projects, follow the structures, follow the project plan. And this is maybe what is a big difference in some projects between the US and Germany, and where the US projects can learn from Germany.
That's interesting. So let's be a little bit more boring when it comes to S4HANA implementation, and we will be more successful.
We have the fun afterwards when we celebrate the go live.
Bring more structure in the project, less emotion. And maybe this is a good follow up, right? What do you think would be a common misconception of blind spot that you see about those projects?
Yep. So with S4HANA, um, we get a lot of buzzwords like clean core, use BTP, etc. And all that comes along with best practices is another one of those buzzwords. And all that comes along with standardization. And what I hear in a lot of projects is, hey, we want to rush through the S4HANA transformation because somehow we need to, because of the mainstream maintenance, or even because of the requirements from the stakeholders or whatever. But we want to rush through and then we standardize later. This is not done, at least in many projects or after many projects. The standardization and the optimization, which comes along with the standardization, is simply not done. And this is a sad thing, actually, I started my SAP career about 18 years ago in a small business here in Germany, in Bavaria. And this was an ERP system which was built in the 90s, or some applications were even built in the 80s. And we always said, hey, SAP, we need something. Can you give us an update? Or are there any new things coming up in the next enhancement packages or whatever? And the only thing what came was more or less bug fixes. Yeah, there were some minor optimizations that SAP brought in, but simply for 20 years, there were not really new things that SAP was providing. But since S4HANA, this completely changed. So now we as consultants, we have to at least every quarter have to dig into the SAP roadmap, into the SAP what's new, and learn about the new things that SAP will provide or has provided in the recent release. And I tell you what, that's hell of work, but it makes fun because there are really things coming up now which I was waiting for years. So I told you about my first, or the company that I first worked with. And in the second year, that was 2010, I guess, I was asked from the QM guys for an FMEA analysis. And I researched a bit and said, hey, SAP is not providing an FMEA analysis. So what we did is, we bought a third-party
And
application.
sorry, and for those who might not know what it is, can you clarify what is an FMEA?
Of course, an FMEA is a failure methods, or what is the E standing for? Why? I'm actually out.
Sorry.
E stands for analysis. I know it in German. It's Fehlermöglichkeiten Einflussanalyse, but it's the same in somehow. So I don't know what the E stands for, but it analyzes why failures are happening,
Okay.
and it rates the failures in QM, and then it gives you like a guidance of how to avoid the failures later on. And that's called FMEA analysis. That's what it's all about. A standard QM methodology that's used all over the world. And every customer who wanted to have this software driven in ERP had to rely on third-party products and had to build an interface to SAP. And really, the customer was asking for that for many years. And I think it was the version 2021. And I looked at the roadmap and I saw SAP new Fiori app FMEA. And I was just like, yes, finally you heard us. But that's really the thing. Yeah. If you don't start with the standardization and optimization, you cannot participate in those ongoing optimization that APs bring. Yeah. And it's really the system, when I look at it now, it is so much better than it was back in the old ERP system. And yeah, as you said, this is one of the things that I definitely hear standardize later. Don't do that. Start standardization right from the beginning. Next to that, what I also hear is very often we have time. First of all, getting back to what we discussed right at the beginning, check your
maybe not.
Yeah, you are on that maintenance list if it's mainstream or enhanced or custom or whatever. But next to that, there is a completely different thing. As I said, the first SAP S/4HANA version was back in 2015. So now we are in the 2025 version, 10 years. But we are still not at the peak of the S/4HANA transformations. I guess the peak of the S/4HANA transformations, and of course I don't know, but also what SAP is telling us, we expect the peak of the S/4HANA transformations in 2027, 2028, probably. Can shift a bit, yeah. But also based on the numbers, not even 50% of the US customers are in S/4HANA now. So there's a big backlog for those. And when we come to 2077 and 2028, the availability of high qualified personnel and also high qualified consultants will be an issue. So when the earlier you start and the earlier you confirm your projects and the earlier you work with your SIs, you can reserve those capacity from the consultants and make sure that you really have high knowledge available for your projects. That's very important.
Yeah, I was wondering, what advice would you give people watching this live session? What are the things they should do as early as possible in order to make a difference and implement a successful transformation?
Yeah, so two things, two things that I already mentioned. One is really change management. Implement the change management right at the beginning. As I said already, just keep that in mind. Second, what I also said, master data, take care of and master data right at the beginning. And there's a third thing, which I haven't mentioned yet, which from my perspective is also very important. SAP is providing a huge number of best practices. And
Mm.
in your project, really use those best practices. They are covering, of course, depending on the industry and how the company is set up and the businesses. But I would say on an average, they are covering around 75% of your business processes. And this is a huge accelerator. In addition to that, if you work with Consilio, we have implemented our own Consilio best practices. And those Consilio best practices, they fit in those 25% gaps. I don't say that we fill it up to 100%, but at least, again, depending on industry and whatever, we can get to, let's say, for example, 90, maybe 95%. Again, it's depending on also the size of the company, but this helps a lot to accelerate. So, to give you a real example, we had a customer who wanted to implement PPDS in S/4HANA as well, and who wanted to work with best practices. And then we said, hey, okay, this is your business process master list. We have defined the business process master list. It contains now 168 processes. And then they ask, and where are the best practices for PPDS, for production planning, detailed scheduling? And we say, hey, they don't exist. For production planning, detailed scheduling, unfortunately, SAP is not providing any best practices. And this was, I don't know, about 5 years ago or something like that. And with that, the idea grew to create also our own PPDS best practices. And we bring those in to our project. And this is really a great accelerator because you implement them, the best practices, you load them, and you directly can go into workshops, into explore workshops with the customer and say, hey, here, this is PPDS. We already have some example materials. We can do a planning run. We can do an optimization run. We can look at the detailed scheduling run. That's already out of the box. And it gives you a great starting point for a discussion and for further developments.
Excellent. All right. So, Dominic, we are getting at the end of this session. We started the session with this amazing slide that summarized really the timeline, and you showed us how much more complex than we sometimes think about this 2027 timeline is. It's actually touching not just ECC, but also S4HANA. So thank you for clarifying that. I remind everyone that those slides are available and you can scan this QR code to download them or just go to this URL. I will paste this URL as a comment on the LinkedIn Live page. It's now time for us to stop. If you had to leave our audience with just maybe one key idea as they are embracing this transformation, what would it be?
Contact Consilio.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone, and see you soon in another live session with Dominic. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.